Life is an existence confined to a brittle bone cage. The soul, a canary led into the coal mines to meet its inevitable demise. Every facet of our lives is invaded by the Reaper just waiting to snip that sliver of thread that keeps us bound to the mortal coil. But what if I told you there was a way to prevent death? What if there was a way to continue a material life without the constraints of saggy flesh, aching muscle, and a plethora of problems that come with aging? You'd take it, wouldn't you? More so, you'd want to use this method to bring back the life of someone dear to you that had recently departed, right? Or would you consider that to be too heinous an act? To attempt to govern life as if enacting the hand of God? Today's game, Shadow Hearts, deals with these themes in a world that seems alien, but also somewhat strangely familiar. Developed by Sacnoth and published by Aruze in Japan and Midway Games in the West, Shadow Hearts hit the Sony PlayStation 2 near the beginning of its life cycle between 2001 and 2002. A JRPG that follows on as a direct sequel from the bad ending of Koudelka, Shadow Hearts takes us on a journey across China and Europe during the early 1900s. We begin the game on the Trans-Siberian Express, a train travelling through South Manchu on its way to Fengtian as it carries some precious cargo, a European beauty, en route to Japan. We take on the role of an unnamed man who rouses from a nap when a dapper gentleman passes his seat nonchalantly. After witnessing the single-handed slaughter of the Japanese army by the man who identifies himself as Roger Bacon, we are treated to the side of our protagonist squashing the brain matter of the demon that committed the massacre, like a pulpy rotten melon being crushed betwixt a tenacious fist. This act shows us that not only are we playing as someone who cannot possibly be human, but the world that we are in, which seems so familiar, is also marginally distant, like a sun-dappled illusion in the shimmering heat of the desert. Thanks again to the genre of magical realism. After a showdown atop the moving railway, where our hero comes out on top, rescuing the damsel and placing an apple-sized cavity into Roger Bacon's face, we are placed into the shoes of the anti-hero, stuck in the plains of rural China amidst a time of civil unrest. Initially, the person we are thrust into the breeches of comes across as rude, cocky, and, for lack of a better word, a pervert, contrasting to the innocent and somewhat naive nature of the woman that he just saved. At this point in the game, I was wondering whether I would even enjoy it, based on these representations. However, as we come to learn, both Yuri and Alice have more depth to them than what is initially presented within the first 30 minutes. Whilst yes, Yuri is lewd and sometimes does some questionable things, especially when it comes to how he acts toward women, he also has a fragile side, which is laid behind memories of what happened to his parents, as well as the fear that he holds toward his own ability as a harmonizer, able to bind himself with demons. Alice, on the other hand, sheds her innocence the further into the story you get, coming out as a headstrong and determined young woman who will go the extra mile to save those that she loves. Joining our leads are a colourful bunch of characters who together create a well-balanced cast that I adored. Zuzan, a Chinese sage and alchemist who brings his knowledge of the arcane to the party. Margaret, a spy for hire who specialises in espionage, whom the party encounter in Fengtian. She brings her technical expertise into battle, with an array of gadgets that seem almost anachronistic against the setting. Keith is a vampire residing in Blue Castle, overseeing the governance of Bistritz. He awakens when nefarious deeds begin to be committed within the town, and joins the party after that problem has been solved for a bit of an adventure. Finally, there is Hallie, a rascal and orphan of the streets of London. He joins the party as they attempt to free some kidnapped children from the facade of an orphanage. He has psychic powers, being the son of Koudelka, who we starred as in her namesake game that came before this one. As I enjoyed all the characters, I often struggled to decide which combination to take with me on the adventure, and found I was constantly switching members in and out of my party, which eventually resulted in Yuri being 10 levels higher than everyone else, but I digress. The magic and charm of the game, for me, came from the real-world setting, where we are permitted to travel to locations that may have existed in the time that the game was set, adding a level of mysticism to steep the plot in intrigue. For example, an extremely missable section of the game sees a party travelling to Kowloon, a walled city in the middle of China that was said to have had a high rate of prostitution, gambling, and drug abuse. The party come to the walled city under the guise of it being haunted, with monsters suddenly appearing from the mist. Traversing the multiple stories of the crushing stone apartments that sit just a little too close for comfort, the party eventually discover the cause of the appearance of the monsters, and the gross experiments that were being conducted there. I loved that the game caused me to turn to external media to research the locations that I visited, to see whether they were real or not, and how much of their historical value was preserved within the game. I felt this even more keenly when travelling across the various areas of Europe. Whilst I adored both the setting and the characters of the game, I cannot say the same about the localization. Some of the dialogue came across very stilted and didn't read naturally, which wasn't a one-off occurrence. One thing that really irked me was for that some reason whoever translated the game had a thing for hating on Hallie, making characters completely out of context and out of the blue say, "Hallie, thou hast not won even once." And this repeats a couple of times through the story for no logical reason, breaking the immersion. And don't get me started on the interpretation of Seamother's epic tale of how Lily's curse came to be, replete with the kind of voice acting you'd find in Resident Evil back on the Sony PlayStation. It seems odd to me that Koudelka could have such a good and believable cast of voice actors, but Shadow Hearts just doesn't. A lot of the descriptions of items within the menu are also a little off, as are some of the monster flavor texts. It's like the translators decided to pull a working designs and tried to insert their own interpretation of humor. I haven't played the Japanese version to be fair though, so I cannot confirm this. I'd much rather preferred if the flavor text for items was more solidly tied to the world that we were traveling through, rather than mentioning things that may have been read in literature by the developers or translators outside of the lore of the game world. Tonally, the game marries the darkness depicted within Koudelka with a bit of humour and the occasional ridiculous antic, which I appreciated a lot. From a town of cats whose despair rankled into a palpable force of evil as a result of their young being consumed by humans, to macabre experiments conducted on children, all in an effort to realise the scriptures written within an ancient text, the setting always startled and put me at a sense of unease. I really enjoyed this, as not many JRPG developers tended to delve into the murky waters of borderline horror in the early noughties. It helps that the game is set in a reflection of our own world, making some of the events and creatures seem more believable when considering local folklore and superstitions. Don't worry though, as this is balanced well against some crude humour, as well as the odd bit of slapstick, which is atypical of Japanese comedy. With a party of 3 travelling across the various areas of the world, you will eventually be pulled into a random encounter. These happen less frequently than in contemporary, so I never found it that frustrating. Battles take place on a separate screen in a turn-based style, with characters being limited by their health and magic points, as well as a H.P. Lovecraft-inspired sanity point SP system. SP acts as somewhat of a timer in battle, causing you to consider your moves carefully. If a character runs out of SP completely, their sanity breaks, they become berserk, and are rendered uncontrollable due to the horrors that they have experienced during their adventure. Thematically, I enjoyed that each character had a set number of points that tied to their character's mentality. For example, Yuri has a much larger pool of SP, as he not only utilises them in order to benefit from his harmonizer powers, but he's also witnessed a lot of dreadful things during his life, and has built the mental fortitude to deal with that. Alice, on the other hand, had just witnessed her father being viscerally ripped apart in the back streets of Rouen, and thus is skating on a thin layer of glass, on the precipice of psychosis. Although I'd caution against turning your back on her, as she seems suspiciously affiliated with the Illuminati. Any way you look at it, it's clear that Sacnoth gave a lot of thought to the characters, not only in how they present themselves narratively, but also in their mental fortitude and abilities. One simply cannot mention the battle system of Shadow Hearts though without the topic of the Judgment Ring coming up. This ring, which becomes a symbol of a seal and permeates the entire game, governs the nature of battle in how your characters perform in combat based on skill with a twist of chance. When you select an action, the judgment ring will appear with the spinning needle, and you need to ensure that the needle hits the correct areas to execute that action. For example, if you are attacking, each character has a set radius within the judgment ring designated as a hit or a perfect area, orange being a hit and red being a perfect. By hitting each of these, your characters will attack with a 3-hit combo. However, if you hit the first and miss the second, the character will only attack once that turn. The same goes for magic. Some have a perfect area, which will boost the power of the spell, in addition to smaller green arcs, each of which must successfully be hit in order to execute the spell. If any of these are missed, then the character skips a turn. It's a risk-reward system, as some of the perfect areas are extremely tiny, so you sometimes risk overshooting the mark, just to boost the power of an attack or spell, which can result in that character's turn being wasted. But every time this happens, it's the player's fault, and not that of the game, almost like gambling. What makes the game even more unique is that due to the existence of the Judgment Ring, there also exist status ailments that affect this directly. Where other games will have you suffer from poison or paralysis, which this game also does, it dishes out another punch with ailments that directly affect a character's Judgment Ring, such as making all your hit areas disappear, making the needle spin super fast, or making the ring itself super tiny, almost to the point where you can't see anything. This added another layer of complexity to the battle system, and furthered the sense of urgency when a character's SP was falling closer and closer to 0. Speaking of gambling, hidden around the world are members of a lottery circuit that will allow you to place a stake on their offerings if you happen to be carrying a lottery ticket. These minigames act the same way as in battle, where you must stop the spinning needle on a certain point to get that prize. Some of these are very difficult to obtain the first prize on, and as there is a limited number of lottery tickets available around the world, you really need to consider whether you want to be wasting them all on the same circuit for a prize that might not even be worth the effort or risk. In addition to the lottery, there are also some sections of the game that require you to use the push ring, which is where you need to keep pushing the X button to keep the needle within a certain area of the judgment ring when the countdown timer reaches 0. Or my personal favourite, the spinning ring, where the ring spins, speeding up after every successful full rotation, and you must stop the needle in each highlighted area every rotation in order to successfully complete the action. No, seriously, this was my favourite. To prepare for battle, each of the characters can equip a weapon, armor, and up to 3 accessories. Weapons can have both their power and hit ring size increased up to 3 times each by seeing an acupuncturist and getting moxibustion, the act of burning dried mugwort on particular points of the body, not the repetitious activity toward a happy ending. This can be expensive, but it can also make some of the earlier weapons better and more effective than later ones that tend to have much smaller hit radiuses, or start their hit areas really close to the start of the ring spin, which can make them difficult to hit successfully, when you are used to other characters having them further from this. I can't mention this upgrading system without talking about the unnecessary negative representation of a gay man, where the Chinese acupuncturist, Mei Yuan, is depicted as being a lecherous man who takes advantage of the male characters of the party by sexually harassing them and touching them inappropriately and unwarranted when he is performing the moxibustion. I wish the impact of this was considered a little more before the game was published, rather than being an attempt to pass off as a joke in poor taste. Whilst most of the caster characters will gain levels and abilities through their experiences in battle, this isn't the case for Yuri, who must visit his graveyard in order to satiate a curse that has been placed upon him. Every time you do battle in the world, this contributes malice toward Yuri, which manifests as monsters within the graveyard. To clear the malice, Yuri must do battle with its manifestation within his mind. The pendant Yuri carries tracks the amount of malice that he has accumulated, and will change colour after a set number of battles. If you allow it to turn red, there is a high chance that either Foxface or one of the masks from the graveyard that administer the curse will come to claim Yuri's soul, so best not to allow this to happen. Defeating enemies in battle also contributes elemental points to each of the gravestones within the graveyard. When you accrue a certain amount, Yuri can examine the grave and face off against a demon. If he wins, he is granted the power to change into that demon during battle. Like accessories, only 3 of these can be equipped to be used in battle at a time, so you need to select wisely. If you have been watching me for a while, you know that I love a good pre-rendered 3D background, and Shadow Hearts does not disappoint in this regard. There is a beautiful plethora of dark, foreboding locations to explore, all with hidden secrets within the finer details, so it always pays to mash that X button when exploring. I loved that the character designs featured nicely within the laid environments, as well as contrasted against the background within battle. Speaking of battles, I must mention the enemy designs, which are the stuff of nightmares. One minute you're facing a spirit of avarice, and the next some strange body horror where you don't know where the dream ends and reality begins. How about the Viscount that turns into a pregnant nun with a head dangling precariously from the hem of her dress? Or my personal favourite, Sir, this is a holy place. You need to put some clothes on. Sir? What are you doing? Get that thing out of my face! Sir? Sir!
Oh my.
The music was composed by Yoshitaka Hirota, who also composed for Koudelka. This time around there are a lot more tracks to choose from, some atmospheric and others catchy and memorable. I like that the tracks all had weird names like Nobody Knocks the Door or Sicking Fucking. My personal favourite track is called Alice, which hits right in the feels, and if you've ever played the game, you'll most certainly know why. The sound design was great too, with a lot of emphasis given to making the atmosphere of the various locations feel unwelcoming, and like you just wanted to escape with your tail tucked between your legs, like a scared little puppy. Shadow Hearts is an amazing tale of 2 unlikely heroes coming together in a setting that could very well be our own history if you squinted hard enough. With a cast of likeable characters who each bring their own to the fray, and a narrative that has you wanting to not put the controller down until you complete just one more section, you're going to be in for a real treat. The unique judgment ring will surely have you punting on one too many risks, and cursing yourself when your risk goes bust and you are forced to skip a turn. Sure, the game does have its flaws, such as the localization and the poor representation of a gay character, but beneath these masks is a glimmering diamond of an adventure just waiting to be undertaken. If you enjoyed Koudelka, then you should play this game to see how the story continues, but maybe leave the lights on for this one. By the way, in narratives, are you more predetermined to enjoy those that are based in magical realism, high fantasy, or sci-fi, or do you like a blend of them all? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venoir with a review of Shadow Hearts for the Sony PlayStation 2. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe for more great JRPG content. As always, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you all again next time. Thanks again, and bye bye for now.